All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Innovation Alchemy. My name is Adam Castle, and this is the podcast that deals with the magic, the mess, and mastery of innovation and those bold enough and brilliant enough to build it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so before we dive in and I introduce the folks to you, I have a bit of a confession. I wasn't until it took me until I was 22 to beat the first Zelda game. And I remember, born in 87, I didn't get my hands on until I think it was 5 or 6. And it was open world before it was even a real thing. And you're stumbling through this insane world that you've never been in before. And somewhere within the first kind of few hours of figuring it out, at least it was for me, I'm sure it was much faster for other people, this old wizard hands you a sword and says, "It's dangerous to go alone. Take this." And so I played this game for 3 more hours and absolutely rage quit. Like 6-year-old me could not handle the difficulty. And the confession is that I put Mario 3 back in. It's linear, it's left to right, it's much easier to manage.
Sure.
And I'm talking about this story today and framing it up because innovation entrepreneurship is a lot like Zelda and a lot less like Super Mario. It's open world, it's nonlinear. There are things around every corner that you're not prepared for. There's a lot of backtracking, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Specifically, how do you get ideas outside of an academic institution and into the real world? And today I'm joined by 2 folks that are absolutely brilliant at exploring this with me. Paul Brereton is the Business Development and Commercialization Officer at the University of Windsor and co-founder of the Data Company. And Paul, you live at the intersection of research, IP, and market reality.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here. And Nick, WeTech client, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but it's absolutely insane every time we talk. I feel dumber. You're an assistant professor at the University of Windsor. You're the Industrial Research Chair in X-ray diffraction and crystalline materials and founder of Solid4m Technologies and actively navigating what we're about to talk about today. So thank you both so much for being here today. I want to talk first about what innovation entrepreneurship actually looks like, from the aspect of taking it from the classroom, the research lab, and then bringing it into the real world. And Nick, I'll start with you.
Okay.
When you first made that decision to move your research towards commercialization, what did you think the journey would look like, and what did it actually look like?
Adam, thanks for having us today. This is really fun. So I guess as an early career researcher, I thought that research really started with, you're pursuing something that you're finding where there's a gap. You think that you can make some potential headway. And then maybe if you have something interesting, you go and you file a patent, and then you would license that technology. And that would kind of be the end of the story. But the reality is it's way less linear than that, and it's much, much messier. Usually the technology is at like a low TRL, so technology, the readiness level. There's more work to get it to market. You need to go out there. You actually need to talk to potential companies that are interested in technology, potential customers. That's a lot of time and effort spent to do that. And really move from technology to knowledge mobilization and the commercialization part, which requires a business plan, the right team, a strong IP portfolio, freedom to operate. How are you going to grow organically? Are you going to get investment? Are you looking for venture capital money? What are the pros and cons of that? So there's so much more to consider than just the initial point of where you have something and you think you have interesting technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And so researcher meet assistant to this process. Paul, when a researcher comes to you at the University of Windsor, what are they often underestimating? And don't talk specifically about Nick. He's in the room.
Well, I mean, he's kind of the poster child of what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because he's here. They're underestimating the 90%, the iceberg of the situation, right? They're experts in that problem, and they dive deep on that problem, and more research is needed. Mm-hmm. Well, more work is needed to get past that point. And it's all of the 1,000 things that aren't part of the problem space that are actually required to get that problem off the bench, out of the lab, and into the world.
Yeah, we get a lot of flack, I think, in this region. There's this misnomer that big things can't come from small places. And I know that you're both working on this in our ecosystem really hard, and you have been for years. Is building a company from research to reality something that's possible in our region, in Windsor?
I think not only is it possible, it's happening right now.
100%. Yeah, it's 100%. It's possible. It's you just need to be aware of what you're getting yourself in for, right? And you have to go into it with that purpose. So 100%. And we have some really unique advantages in our region that we can take advantage of. And it is happening, and we want to see more of it happening. We need, the supports to get there.
So we agree that it's possible, but it's messy.
100%.
And so, Nick, in our pre-interview here, we discussed actually a lot of analogies, many that stayed with me long into the night after our conversation. But one of the things you said was this metaphor around mining, in that universities are incredible at mining knowledge,
right.
And discovery is this ore. Commercialization is the refining process, and you need a refinery that needs to happen. But where does that refining typically break down in process? Where have you seen it personally? And Paul, where do you see it more as a trend level?
The concept around this kind of analogy is that the individual researcher or research groups are mining operations for new knowledge. And it doesn't matter what discipline you're in, you are in this search. And you think you have an idea, and you're going to refine it as you go. And then once you find it, your usual path is to go and publish that research, right? And for a lot of people, that might be where it ends, right? They might extend the inquiry. They might, find something else to go explore. So that raw thing that you've mined at that point is that raw ore. It's not refined. And if you want to go and take that step of knowledge mobilization towards commercialization, you need to refine it. So where does that fall apart? Well, it falls apart at the point of okay, well, you have something interesting, but now you have to go and find the correct market fit. You think you've made a solution, but you need to go out there and you need to talk to potential customers, talk to companies that work in that space. Most likely, you have missed part of the solution. Yeah. You might have solved one thing, but there are several other variables which you didn't solve for, which you may not have thought of, and you need to be able to go and interact to increase usually the technology and adapt it to be ready. And then there's the whole process of okay, well, now it's actually time for commercialization. So who's the team that's going to put it forward? If you're a university research group, somebody like me might maybe start off as the director or CEO of a company, but really my position should be more of a chief science officer. And there's somebody else that needs to be running the reins of that and thinking about, okay, how are we going to make the partnerships? Are we growing organically? Those things we mentioned before, where's the additional investment coming from? Finding the right fit. So all those things, the messy part of commercialization comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, what do you see from more of that trend perspective? And also as an entrepreneur as well, you see it on both ends. As an entrepreneur outside of academia to commercialize something, there's a difference there. And our audience here is founders of all different types from our region, but also throughout Ontario. What do you kind of see from that trend perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, to continue with the analogy, the mining the raw ore out of the ground is a relatively straightforward process. Right, I find it, I see it, I dig it out, I hammer it out, I get it out of there. Right. When you move into that, the period of refinement is not just a subtractive process, it's an additive process. It's about changing that raw ore into something, and it takes resources, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a team, it takes all of these things. To Nick's point there, he's an expert, the scientist is an expert, the PI is an expert in that piece, and not an expert in the 25 other things, 250 other things that have to happen. And reliance on a team, creating a team, finding a team, reliance on your customers, potential customers, to communicate what they actually need, and going and finding them and talking to them, which is absolutely key. And then relying on the resources that are around you to be a force multiplier, to be these levers and these buttons that you can activate to make each one of those steps far more important and far more grand than you could have if you were on your own.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, Nick, you've got this academic mindset.
Yeah.
How does that potentially clash with the ambiguity that comes along with commercialization? Because, in talking to you, you've got such a precise way of looking at things. There's a bit of a a challenge
So there certainly is I think for commercialization, done is better than perfect, because as an academic, you want to find the absolute best solution to this problem, right? But in order for the commercialization part, you kind of have to switch your mindset. Okay, well, this is version 1. This is what version 1 can do. How do I get out there, gain validation? I'll use that. Build your, minimum viable product, build your MVP. Okay, get feedback that's going to tell you, okay, well, actually, this is good. And you could have perfected this one solution to this one variable that you were working on. But the reality is you need to change your direction to actually solve for these 3 other problems that you weren't aware of. And if you don't you're out there and get that validation and learn, like, okay, is this actually going to solve the problem? The faster you get out there and get that information, the faster you can adapt and change what you're doing to make sure you're building the right thing in the first place. Right? So I think that's an important part, that there needs to be this balance between, yes, you want a solution. It might not be the best one. Get that out there on the commercialization part, but that'll help you come back in and solve for the other variables. So there's this kind of balance between the two. You want to have the fundamental science and the things if you have a tech kind of business, right? But you also need to think about, okay, well, we need something out there gaining feedback, and depending on if this is an actual business that's, you have people's lives depending on, you need to generate revenue to support these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
when you were building your own business, what was that moment that you were like, oh, this is going to require a lot more than the science?
Right. So the way I've approached things is always to try to have strategic partnerships that help move things forward, right? So part of this work has been working with local industry. So I work with Proto Manufacturing as a local company. We've helped them develop new products and services. Now, when it came to developing something that was different outside of their expertise, this is where the learning really came into play, where it became, okay, well, how are you going to do this without those additional supports that you had previously? And it gets messy, right? Remind me of what was the original question?
Yeah. So at what point? So really, back to the Zelda piece.
Right.
This is where the rage quitting happens.
Yes.
Right. This is the part where things get really sticky, and oftentimes an academic will say it's not worth it,
right?
Or I want to go back to discovery. The refining piece is not for me.
Yes. Yeah. And that can happen. It depends on what the goal of the person doing the work is. Is the goal just the knowledge, or do you actually want knowledge mobilization? So some of the sticky parts where I realized it was going to be really tough was when we said, okay, we have one business plan, and that could have this output. Now, if you change the business plan, your output could be 10 times higher, right? But that's going to require significant investment. And so I started to explore, well, what would a funding raise look like? And just what that campaign looks like after talking to people, going out speaking, the stats will tell you that you got to go speak to 400 potential, venture capital. And all of a sudden you got goalposts that are being met to get the next round of funding. That, it's a whole enterprise on its own. And you need to decide, as a researcher, I kind of took a step back and said, okay, well, I can't do both of these. So I either need somebody from my team that says, okay, I actually want to run with that, and I want to be the person that's going to lead that initiative, and in the meantime, I'm focusing on the technology, making sure that we have, a strong IP portfolio. And being in an academic lab gives you a little bit of that freedom to, you have this longer runway, and you don't have to move as fast because you're using your research and training students, and you have that additional kind of non-dilutive funding that allows you to perfect the technology until you have somebody, either a person or that you make a partnership or a company that's going to help you do that handoff.
So there's almost this not a hidden advantage, but an unspoken advantage to being able to do this work, where you have a runway that many folks outside of an academic institution doesn't quite get.
No, that is 100% an advantage. And we're meeting multiple milestones at the same time because we're doing training, we're doing research. There's the potential of this research to have a commercialization potential, but that's not our primary focus, right?
Yeah.
Like we're there to discover new knowledge, and that is always our primary focus. But what we want to do is provide those opportunities for students that are enterprising, for other people in my lab to take that and move it forward, forward that knowledge mobilization. So Canadian universities have a very unique way to develop technology and can help the country really advance and create new economic opportunities.
And that's something that's obviously so needed right
100%,
now as we're looking at, the largest investment in Buy Canadian procurement that we've seen in a generation, right? So Paul, I know the University of Windsor is hard at work at creating these structures when your researchers hit that rage quit moment where you don't hand them Super Mario, you tell them like, try Zelda one more time. Explain to me a little bit about some of the stuff that you're building there.
Yeah. So we're working on some pretty cool stuff. Stuff that I can't say in name, but I can say in purpose.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting for me. And I get the privilege of working with lots of researchers and inventors and seeing all of the things that they're working on, which is a whole separate podcast's worth of excitement. But when they get to that moment, I often ask a question, and it's like, what ultimately do you want to do with this, right? Do you want to change the world? Do you want to make $1 million? Do you want to do both? Do you want to teach? Do you want to go on to the next best thing? And none of the answers to those questions are to preclude anything. It's just the mindset that it takes to do any one of those things is how we change the approach. And what we're currently working on at the university is ways to support all of those in their own special way. So, we're working on a program that supports startups that are a direct result from research, and to provide them with curated access to additional resources, whether that be space or access to industry or access to partners, access to other researchers. I mean, we have a lot of people doing a lot of different research, and just getting two really smart people in the same room at the same time could result in a breakout moment in one direction or the other. We're also working all the way down the pipeline to students coming in the first day. Their job is to learn, and when you learn, you come up with ideas. And creating an environment that is really favorable for an idea to turn into something, and that something to turn into something big, and that something big to turn into the next great thing is what it's all about. So we're trying to focus not on any one avenue like research commercialization, but the entire ecosystem of innovation and knowledge mobilization, so that everyone has an opportunity, whether they're a day one freshman or they're a postdoc or they're a tenured professor with 30 years under their belt. They can have something there to do the next great thing.
That's awesome. And so needed. And, as we look at this conversation, we're talking about that importance of having an industrial partner on board, and you kind of surfaced that early. But you're kind of seeing this opportunity, right? Like academic entrepreneurship has a huge opportunity outside of what you'd typically find in market, being a standalone founder. There's some unique challenges as well. But one of those pieces is how engaged the community is around it, how engaged those industrial players are in your space, because they have problems that need solving as well. And there's no better type of investment that you can make than in an institutional environment where you've got a lot of brilliant people working on those challenges. So, Paul, if you're listening right now in this audience and you're an industry player, what are you looking about, and why should you care about those academic partnerships?
It's really interesting because industry partners are entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs at their soul, and then that's how they got to where they are, and they identified problems, and they found ways to solve those problems and to grow to the point where they are. And academic researchers and student startups and all of that are in that early phase of that. They're the same, just in different stages. So when you're in industry and you're looking back at this academic environment, commercialization environment that we're trying to work on, curate, and provide, you have R&D. You've got fresh minds and new ideas. You've got people who aren't entrenched in the old way of doing things, and they're all hungry to do the next thing. So you can, with a relatively low barrier, find partnerships within our ecosystem that allow you to 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x your capabilities for next to no investment. Right? I mean, established companies, money's tough for everybody now. And you're trading in brilliance.
Yeah, I think the pushback to that is always like, well, I don't want to get involved too early. If I get involved too early, it's going to take too much time, or I don't have that. We don't have the capacity for it. But you and a company that got involved with you at day one of this product, what's been the benefit to them being there from the beginning?
Yeah, so the advantage of having like well-aligned strategic partners, I can't explain how much of a multiplier and how important that is, right? Now, not all partnerships, it really depends on having kind of aligned goals. But in the best case scenario, I'll say that you have aligned goals where there's kind of new science that you're trying to do. At the same time, the company has a product or service that they ultimately want to be able to sell. And if there's an alignment on, okay, well, we're working on this and this is what you're going to get for your investment, while we're also going to be doing this additional research, which may have its own kind of potential economic opportunities down the line, that you can gain so much. Like they can be on the front line of developing a new technology that opens up a whole new market for them, right?
Yeah.
And this is what we've seen. We were developing something, we had a plan, we found out how, this can significantly improve, open the company up to a new market, and that became a new scientific instrument that that company now sells. We get to keep prototypes, we do interesting material science with them that have led to completely different directions and kind of drug release materials and things of that nature. So having strategic partners and it depends on what the outcome is. Sometimes the company just has a problem that they need fixing, and that's fine. And that's at like kind of a very preliminary level of engagement. But where you have like real strategic kind of alignment between the academic research and the industry partner, where they have a short-term and a long-term vision, that's where you can really get like substantial benefit.
Yeah, at that point, you kind of create a flywheel, right? Where you're building on all of these amazing things that are creating out, but those are leading to additional opportunities for kind of both parties or all three parties, right? The university involved as well. If I'm industry out there and I'm wondering like, this is super interesting, but how would I even get started? What is that approach? Like, what is step one to getting involved with the University of Windsor from a research capacity as an industry member?
Yeah, so you can reach directly out to our office. So our office is the Office of Innovation, Partnerships, and Entrepreneurship, so IPE, and under that is the partnerships branch. And we have people that are assigned to handle those initial calls and to find those match opportunities. Likewise, you can go in, look at any of the body of research that's coming out of the University of Windsor and treat it as a menu. And look, that's a really cool thing that's happening. Like that kind of aligns with this publication. We regularly have all kinds of poster events. You will discover is a big event for innovation amongst students. WeSpark has events that are around healthcare, and those are also great opportunities to see what the things that we're working on are, and any one of those might align with what you have. And then it's just an email away.
That's awesome.
And there's ample opportunities also for like, joint funding initiatives. There's government support. Like when you find the correct strategic alignment, you can leverage funding to 2-3x, more of those multipliers for funding, and you gain potential highly qualified personnel at the end of it. You might start a research project, gain a solution to your problem, but then actually gain an employee at the end of it that fits directly into your process, right? So it's a win all around.
It really underscores the fact that we don't need more spectators in this space. Canada's in a moment of action, right? Like there's this national push for us all to create, to be productive, to kind of move things in a different direction. And unless you're putting your hat in the ring and you're getting involved, especially at this ground floor where discovery is happening, where the ore is being unearthed for the first time, it's really easy to kind of miss that opportunity altogether. And so finding those collaborators, I think is just so important. Now, 100%. You're a client of WeTech Alliance, shameless plug. And Paul, you are a collaborator and a referral partner of our organization. There's a line between what we can and cannot do in this space. We're not going to build a business for you, but we can offer connections as a connection accelerator to pretty much everywhere you need to go with an idea. What was some of the learnings that you've had in your journey as a client around like what is a good boundary for what you're going to allow these support organizations to do and what you want to do in-house as the entrepreneur, as the lead on this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think initially you probably have this false idea of what it's going to take, and that you're going to come there with your technology, and then somebody's just going to find you all the potential customers and give you a business plan and have everything laid out for you and
nice
be like, you're like, okay, thank you very much. And so I very much, I think that there's kind of, I don't know, fantasy thinking in terms of that, because you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then the reality is that, well, you do have to spend the time to go out there and meet with people yourself. That's, super important. And I think what you want out of an organization like WeTech is just to help you lower barriers. Like you're not going to unload really any of the process completely, but you're just looking for support, a step stool, reducing the floor that you have to go to, helping to make connections. And if you view it that way, it's like, okay, this is an assist. It's not a crutch. You can't depend on somebody to do it for you. And I think that that's something I've learned, that, if you either need a strategic research partnership or you need somebody that is going to run with that idea, and that's going to be their primary focus, right? Their purpose.
Yeah. And so that kind of goes into, why is it so important to have that co-champion to these products and to this process? Because it can't just be, dependent on one person or the organizations that they're kind of dependent on. There's a difference between support and dependency kind of in this journey. And there's so much that the originator of the idea has to carry with them. Like there's that passion aspect of it that like things don't move along unless you have that person kind of carrying the banner, carrying the sword with them.
100%.
The process is the value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I'm kind of famous for saying this in our ecosystem, but there's no such thing as a one-time entrepreneur. Ever. It's the mindset that creates an entrepreneur, creates an entrepreneur forever. So the more they work to learn how to do this, the better it becomes, and the better every subsequent attempt at anything along entrepreneurship becomes.
Oh, for sure.
So if we just handed all of the answers, then I might get better at doing that, but that's not the point here.
Yeah.
I'll just so I think that a lot of people see themselves in the university, researchers and students, as potentially as innovators, like solving problems. They might not see themselves as entrepreneurs, which is okay. But we want the systems and things in place to lower barriers so that people can see the path, so that if they want to walk it, they can. You want everybody, I think, to be a little bit more enterprising, to understand those processes, because it's only going to help them later on in their careers. So I don't know. That's just something that, I think that's important in this like kind of conversation.
Yeah, for sure. No, I completely agree. And I think too, whether or not you're an innovator inside of an institution or you're outside of that, this idea that nothing is really anymore built without a foundation. So like all of the research that's being done right now, it's based on something, right? Like there's a pool of it. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, if we don't have other entrepreneurs in our region that have a bit of a blueprint, that aren't necessarily a million steps ahead, but even one or two to say like, hey, like I'll give you a hand and I'll show you, this next screen, there's 6 monsters that are going to kick your ass unless you approach them this way. There's that, a lot of that too, right? And so just so that, in research, you need this body of work in order to produce the next iteration. In entrepreneurship, we find that too, of like, if you don't have that connectivity, and I think that's a big role that I see WeTech playing, and we have in the past, but want to more, is like there's a blueprint for this. And while we can't walk it for you, we can't do that work for you, we can kind of be the phone a friend that helps you connect to someone who has, right?
100%. You want that founders helping founders kind of approach. You want that ecosystem, and you need those supports. Like those are critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could hand one sword to a researcher before they start on this journey, what would that look like?
Wow. Resilience, and if you want to use business terms, the ability to pivot or change directions as you gain new information. So if you have that fortitude and that flexibility, so that how badly do you want to see with the work that you're doing reaching impact in terms of being out there in the market, helping people, making a difference, right? So if you want to see that, well, the reality is that there's many monsters that are going to come up, right? And you have one sword or, weapon for that particular, but the reality is that you're going to need other ones.
Yeah.
You're going to need to get outside of your comfort zone, and then you're going to need help.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have that ability to change as you gain in for more information about, well, what does the problem actually take to solve? If I've solved one problem for this particular industry, but the reality is it needs to meet these other parts. Okay, fix those. How am I going to get the support to fix those? And then who's the team and the partner or combined thereof that is going to move that forward?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the clarity, right? Required. Paul, what's the sword you're handing out?
Get out of the lab and talk.
Yeah.
Talk to customers, talk to potential customers, talk to people who have the problem, talk to people who specifically don't have the problem, and figure all of that out, right? Like your idea, your innovation is only as good as the people that actually want it on the far side of it. And you talk about like you're going to need more weapons, you're going to need more swords. Having a community of potential customers and people that identify with what you're working on can tell you where the bad guys are hiding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't go behind that bush over there.
Yeah.
It's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
I don't even need to take the sword out to get that
Right.
answer. So getting out of the lab, getting out of your office, talking to people, building the network, whether it's a business network or it's a research network or it's just a peer network of people that get together and commiserate and celebrate together. Having those resources are far beyond the brilliance that you have in that.
Yeah. I think it's trifold, right? Like you 100%. Need a mindset. First and foremost, you need a penchant for relationship building, but then you also need the skills necessary to see the wall, but to go through it, because there is no going over or around in these cases for entrepreneurship. I just talked about this earlier today. Like there's no shortcuts to this stuff.
No.
It's the grind. It's the iteration.
The amount of time and effort, and something that like I didn't appreciate before was that you need to be going out there. Even as a researcher, you think you have like a problem figured out, but if you're not talking to the people that are on the front lines at the companies that are actually implementing these kinds of problems, you are going to miss things that weren't in the last published paper that was done. So the importance of being the person that's going out there, talking to companies, talking to customers, which are going to go back into your feedback loop and help you design the next iteration, is so critical.
Yeah.
And it's something that researchers need to do more of. We need to interact more with industrial researchers. We need to interact more with who we want the end users of our technology to be in order to optimize the next experiments that we're going to do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you both so much for having this conversation with me, and I hope to have you back as more things roll at the University of Windsor, and Nick, as you progress in multiple entrepreneurial endeavors. But I think, as you heard today, whether or not you're a researcher listening to this or an industrial partner looking for how to get involved, the invitation is the same. To bring us back to, I think, our nerdy beginnings of this conversation, it is dangerous to go alone, and partners are powerful tools.
100%.
So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Adam. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
it. And thank WeTech for all their support. 100%.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here and support this community for us. So it's what we love to do. From Innovation Alchemy, I'm Adam Castle, and we'll see you on the next one.